First thing I'll hear is the flushing.
New corporation.
Okay, let's see if it works.
Sure.
We're
We're gonna log in and see if it just tested here.
Because I might open a corporation. Somebody was telling me that I might open a corporation tomorrow.
Okay, let's wait for feedback. Let's talk.
Talk.
Hello.
I don't think it's broadcasting
Hi, everyone.
yet. Oh, hang on.
Okay.
Nothing?
Okay, they hear. One person hears.
You hear me?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. It's working.
Okay, great.
All right. Start again.
Got it.
All right,
Yes.
here we go. All right, take two. Here we go. So again, as we're in the time of the Yom Noraim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Slichos, Teshuva, we have all these things on our mind, and for many of us, it brings up a certain amount of anxiety, a certain amount of discomfort. There's a lot of focus on punishment and on all sorts of things that are not so comfortable. And so I want to try to explore tonight if there's a way that we can talk about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Teshuva process, and still make it meaningful and still make it real, and yet at the same time sort of move away from some of those more negative associations and turn it into something that I think is a little bit more positive. Okay, so just to start, earlier this week, I got a message from a high school student that I know. I don't even remember exactly what the question was, but it was some sort of like really philosophical question about Rosh Hashanah. Oh, am I still there?
Yeah, I just closed Facebook because I don't want to make noise.
Yeah, okay. Okay. He asked me some sort of like really philosophical question. How do you deal with this when it comes to Rosh Hashanah? And I said to him, like, the truth is, like, I don't like to do philosophy. I don't like when it comes to Rosh Hashanah. I don't like to, there's a certain temptation. I think sometimes, I think this time of year, I think is really a time where we have to make sure to not just get stuck in our head, to not make everything just over intellectualize everything. It's a time that I think we really have to experience things. I think that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a time where it's not just, you can talk about, there's a lot of questions you could ask about Teshuva and how does it work and all these different things. But I think sometimes in doing that, if you over intellectualize it, I think you miss a very, very important experience of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which I think is supposed to be a little bit more visceral, a little bit more like hit you a little bit in the gut. So rather than call this a shiur, certainly not a lecture, and speech makes me think of like my parents' shul, like in the young Israel. I don't know, I guess we'll call it maybe a shmooze or something like that. I mean, I'm not going to not going to analyze Teshuva or anything like that. I'm not going to give you, hopefully by the end, though, a combination of Torah and some personal thoughts that will have an approach that will give us something to think about in a way to approach this time of year that comes out very positive. So I mentioned, that personally, this is a topic that speaks to me as well. So just two quick personal experiences. I remember, I don't know in whatever world you're from, but in the world that I grew up, Yeshiva Flatbush right down the block, many of us when we graduate high school, you go and you spend a year, maybe 2 years if you get into it. I didn't get into it. I only spent a year. Spend a year in yeshiva, and kind of some people flip out. Some people get a little frummer.
You mean like yeshiva in Israel?
Yeah, yeshiva in Israel. And I remember I came back the year after my year in Israel, and we were davening. My father, Olav Shalom, it's actually today would have been his 80th birthday. We were davening Yom Kippur, and I remember, we were saying the Al Chetz, and I was, punching myself in the chest, right? I mean, there's a minute that we're supposed to, as you go through, when you hit yourself. I wasn't hitting myself. I mean, I was like, I was beating the heck out of, every single time. I was really, really hitting myself. And I remember my father after davening, I must have been, I don't know, about 19, 20 years old. I remember my father after davening said, you don't have to hit yourself so hard. But I remember like thinking that, like, in my mind, clearly there was something about, that Yom Kippur is about, you've done something wrong and, you have to suffer for it. And, maybe if you, hit yourself hard enough or you make yourself uncomfortable enough or something like that, maybe God will let you off. But if not, you're going to get it.
Sure, that's what it's like.
And so that's the experience that I had.
That's what
yeah. So that's one experience. The second one, I mentioned the other day, to a few people, I have a very mixed experience when it comes to slichos because of this also. I mean, it's always at the beginning of the year. I'm starting school. I don't do very well with sleep. I have all sorts of excuses why I don't get so into slichos. But the truth is that it's a little bit of it's a tough experience for me. It's something that, again, there's a lot of, there are all these feelings of guilt and there's all these fear of punishment. And so in a lot of what I'm going to speak about tonight, I went the other night to Slichas after Motzi Shabbos, and I try to apply it a little bit. I try to go through as we're going through the Slichas to read it in a way, to experience it in a way, to think about it in a way that didn't feel like I usually do. To not notice all of the we stink, we're bad, please don't punish us, please don't kill me, all those kind of things. And at least so far it really gave me a very, very different experience. So hopefully hopefully we can, reach a point where we can treat this time of year, the the whole Teshuva process, without a negative process of guilt, without a sense of, fear, without a sense of, if I don't do this right, I'm, going to be punished in some sort of really, really negative way. So just to start off a little bit further before we get into some of the actual sources, I don't know if anybody online or here, probably not here, but anyone online maybe is old enough to remember. But there was, when I was growing up in the 80s, there was this Russian comedian, right? I mean, there was like the whole free Soviet Jewry. There was all these rallies to get the Soviet Jews out, and then little they started coming in. There was a fairly, I don't know if he's still around or not. He's a Jewish comedian, Russian comedian. His name is Yakov Smirnov. Yeah. He used to tell all these jokes in Russian accent. What a country, very, very, at least in my day, he was famous. These days, probably nobody knows what I'm talking about. But he had this little shtick that I still remember. I mean, he said, in Russia, and this was in the days of communism before the
Soviet Russia,
right? The Iron Curtain came down. He said, in Russia, we had 2 TV stations. The official station, and on Channel 2, there was a guy with a gun who said, "Turn back to Channel 1." and I was thinking about that, and I think that sometimes when it comes to our education, that's sort of the approach that we get. We're told that there is a certain approach that we follow, that we're supposed to follow, that this is the MS, and anything else, you go that's wrong. Turn back to Channel 1. And the other thing, and then also again, he was in this movie. He was called Moscow on the Hudson. I don't remember any of it. I don't even know if I even saw the whole movie. But I remember there's one scene, right? And again, in those days, communist Russia, you would wait online, for 6 hours, to get a little, like one type of coffee. And there's a scene in the movie where he walks into an American supermarket, and he's just like he's looking at all the different brands. I don't know if it's coffee or cereal, whatever it is, and he's looking and he's reading off the labels, and he just all of a sudden he passes out. He's just like, he's so shocked by all the different choices. And I think that one of the things that, that I try to do is really, again, I'm not here to tell you that the approach I'm going to tell you is the only approach. It's not the only approach. The approaches that do focus on guilt and do focus on all these kind of things, there are makaros for it. There are other approaches. There's no, it's not that, there are many, but one of the things that hopefully the more we learn and the more we're exposed to sort of, many of the thinkers that we didn't get to learn when we were growing up, when we were told, turn back to Channel 1, we see that there really, that there are other approaches that also have makaros, that also have their approach. So with that in mind, the interesting thing is first of all, if you've looked both, both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are supposed to be joyous days, right? I mean, if you open up, for example, the Sefer, Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah, one at the end of Ksuvim, right? We all know that in second base of Mikdash, Ezra and Nehemiah, they're involved. Some of the Jews come back. It's really, in fact, maybe analogous today, a little bit similar to today. The Jews who come back to build up the land after, after the Galus are over, it's not the most serious people. It's not the wealthy people. It's not necessarily the biggest scholars. It's a lot of people who are not necessarily involved in such good things. And I mean, there's a lot of intermarriage going on. There's a lot of problems. And right at the end of Perek Zayin in Nehemiah, right, it says, it's an interesting thing. Like, again, like we focus on that again, and it does create this very, if that's your focus for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it does. It's scary sounding, and people don't, not everyone makes it through the year. But again, I think that there are so many different parts, and again, that's what I was saying, like both in terms of slichos and in terms of davening. There's so many other parts and the aspects of it that we should, I think, maybe try to have a little bit less focus on it. Again, you could say it, and again, it's something we could be introspective about. But again, this sort of like obsession with if I do the right thing, X will happen. If I do the wrong thing, Y will happen. I think the Rambam really pushes us to stay away from that. So that's part one. Second thing is I want to look at a little bit sort of like two approaches to tshuva that are very maybe different than the way we think about it, right? There are a lot of questions about tshuva, about how it works, right? Tshuva means to return, what we're returning to, what it's about. Is it about changing the past, or is it about changing the future? I mean, Svarim. We're sitting here in the library, but there's so many Svarim written about this. I want to just look at two approaches. One, just partially the Rambam, and the other one is going to be Rav Kook, who I think really is going to really get us to where we want to go. The first thing is if we take a look at the Rambam, right? The Rambam is known, among other things, as being like an incredibly logical, rational thinker, right? I mean, that's why the Briskers love him, right? Everything was with categories, and why is this halacha put over here and not over there, and why did he group this together? And again, and if you read the introduction, I mean, he talks about it. He's very, he is a very, very rational thinker. And if you think about it, you would think that, in other words, in terms of our understanding, right? I mean, he has a whole section in the Mishnah Torah called Hilchos Tshuva. You would think that where would he put the halachos of Tshuva, right? In other words, if he groups things according to what it's connected to, right? When do we do Tshuva? Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? You would think, right? He has a whole section called, he has a whole sefer called Sefer Zmanim, and it goes through Shabbos and all the different Yom Tovim, and that's where all the halachos. You would think that this would be over there. After all, Yom Kippur is the time about Tshuva, right? It's the time. This is the time, Miyechem, Miyamus, and all the Svarim, everything like that. Very interestingly, the Rambam does not put it there. The Rambam has at the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, he has a sefer called Sefer Mada, which is where he puts all his philosophical stuff that he wants to put into Mishnah Torah. There's a lot of philosophical stuff that for whatever reason he doesn't want to put in the Mishnah Torah. He puts that in the Moreh Nevuchim and enter at your own risk. But at least the stuff that he wants to put in the Mishnah Torah, he puts the philosophical stuff he puts in Sefer Mada. So that already is very, very interesting. Tshuva is not, for the Rambam, this idea of somehow, like, again, yes, he does. He talks about that, but Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a particularly important time to do it. It's sort of like the last, time of the year to kind of do an accounting for the year. But again, for the Rambam, if you look, and if you look in Hilchos Tshuva, there's a lot of stuff in there that just seems like he just threw in all sorts of things. Just, I don't know, he couldn't figure out where else to put it. And he talks about Olam Haba, and he talks about free will. And it's really strange because, I mean, this is supposed to be Hilchos Tshuva. But what seems to be, and here's something key, and again, like I want to try to avoid being like too intellectual or philosophical with this, but here's the key point over here. For the Rambam, Tshuva is not some sort of way to like make up for the past or some sort of way to avoid punishment, but Tshuva is a process of self-improvement. It's not, in other words, sometimes when some people, when they think about tshuva, it's like, I did all these averos in the past, and if I do tshuva, maybe I could save myself being punished. The Rambam really doesn't focus on that. For the Rambam, it really is not, what did I do wrong in the past? But in other words, like, if I look at where things turned out, how can I change myself now to improve things for the future? In other words, it really is about, again, I don't want to make it sound like all new agey or like it's about self-improvement, but it really, it's about this idea that of working on yourself moving forward. That, in other words, that if you do something wrong, rather than it being something, again, as I said before, that's going to get you punished or something like that, it's something that you have to look at. You have to be a little bit introspective. Well, what got me to make that mistake, right? Like the Gemara famously says, right, it says, right, in Adam nechnas bo rosh das. Like, unless the only time a person would sin is when they don't think clearly. They're thinking in a foolish manner. So Rambam says, okay, so what is tshuva? Tshuva is, again, not, beating yourself up for why you did that, but it's sort of like looking at what you've done in the past and saying, okay, you know what? Well, what was that based on? Why did I act in that manner at that time? Okay, I see where my mistake was. Let me now try to do that. And his focus really is about, if you look, for example, he really does talk about, these various ideas. He says, "Gedola tshuva shemikareves as ha'adam l'shechina." It brings you close to God, right? Again, it's something that, in other words, the ultimate goal, for the Rambam. Again, and however we want to talk about how the Rambam understands Olam Haba, which is a whole other topic. But whatever the Rambam's idea of Olam Haba, it's this. But he seems to be saying almost like that Olam Haba, which for him is this very it's this intellectual closeness with God that you can have. You can achieve this in this world, right? In other words, if in the past you haven't been thinking things through clearly, if you do tshuva and you start to think, improve, and you start to work on yourself towards thinking about things more clearly, it actually brings you close to Hashem, right? And he says, in this is all in Perek Zion, right? Again, he talks about it as a very, very positive thing. There really is not this, again, there are some whose approach to tshuva is this very, very negative, like beat yourself up. For some reason, some of the Ashkenazi Rishonim were very into these ideas of, sitting outside in the snow and fasting and all these sort of ways to again, like somehow if you punish yourself enough here, that would somehow be mechaper. That's completely, not found in the Rambam's approach. Again, for the Rambam, it really is an idea. Again, it really is this idea. His focus is that it really is forward thinking. It's not dwelling on your past. It's not about beating yourself up in terms of the averos, but it really is this approach of trying to move forward in a way that things are going to get better.
It's down. Nope.
Time out.
That sounds like a also sort of doing daily inventory and looking at what causes.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It sounds weird to put it that way, but that's really what it is. In other words, it really is a sense of sort of looking at yourself and trying to catch where your things are not going.
But the pasuk says, "V'anis Kippur." They should fast, but I don't remember the lashon.
Right. Yeah, of course. No. And the Rambam's not going to deny that. But in other words, the question is, what is the purpose of that? In other words, is it a form of punishing yourself, or is it a point? In fact, look, even the Gemara in Yoma, it says, you might have thought that you should make yourself sit in the cold, or you make yourself sit in the sun, punish. And it says, then it says, Tamalo, no, it's not true.
Maybe God's going to feel bad for us.
No, but that's what he's saying. The Gemara actually rejects it, and the Rambam is clearly saying that it's not how it works.
So what is the purpose of fasting?
Again.
Nope.
Maybe to remove us from a little bit of physicality, or move back up, or no?
It's a true inouï for the ego to commit a wrong. It is
right. Yeah.
Go there, feel horrible, but learn and grow.
Right. That's the thing. But it's not. Again, it's not.
It's not a negative thing.
Right. And certainly not a sense of beating yourself up. So we're up. We're not up.
One person's hearing it. One person's not really.
All right. I'll do my best. Okay. So so that's already the Rambam. The Rambam again is already much more of rather than this looking in the past and rather than this sort of beating yourself up, and it's about avoid. And he doesn't really even talk so much about it's not about avoiding punishment. Again, that's what the Rambam said at the beginning in Perek Chelek. Don't think in those terms. Think about how do I get to the place where I should be. Not oh well I better get there or someone's going to beat me up. Or I better get there, so then I'll get, I'll get, brownie points, or I'll get, money, or God will make me rich, or all those things. He says again, those are all things that's like immature thinking. It's really, you're supposed to get there because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so that's one approach. Rav Kook takes it, as Rav Kook often does. Takes a really, really, I think, radical approach to what Teshuva is about, and I think that really, helps us in this regard as well, right? Right. Again, we've spoken about him before, but Rav Kook lived at a time where there was, initially he was a Rav in Europe and a couple of different communities in the late 19th century. He made Aliyah to Israel in 1904, where he lived for the last 31 years of his life. It was just his 80th yahrzeit a few weeks ago. And that time in Eastern Europe, he learned in the Lajin Yeshiva, the Jewish people were going through a tremendous, tremendous upheaval at this time. Right? They were, in certain places they were being allowed to get a secular education, essentially for the first time, and there were all sorts of questions that were coming up from philosophy and secular Zionism and all sorts of philosophers were talking about either how religion was dead, or we're certainly talking about how Judaism was dead. And it was a very, very difficult time. I mean, for some, the approach was, la, 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 I do not hear you, and we're going to try to shut that out. But as we know, and we certainly see that this is true today as well, it doesn't really work so well. When you can try to, it's sort of like putting your finger in the dike, like when there's a little crack and you plug it up and you say, okay, we're not going to do that. Another crack opens up, right? It's very, you can't really do that. And Rav Kook took a very, very radical approach. And Rav Kook said the questions that people have and the struggles that people have and the challenges to religion that people have, rather than reject them and say that they're all wrong and they're all kfira and they're all, he said, you know what, that these are all, it really is an opportunity for Judaism as a religion to think about how it's being challenged and to figure out how to answer it. Or in other words, again, rather than seeing it as something that was bad and negative that had to be shut out, how are we doing?
Just trying to switch networks. You can keep going.
It's fine. Oh, wait a minute.
No, it's okay. Whatever. Some people are hearing it, some people are not. So
okay. So he decided to really listen to what they were saying, to listen to these things, and to really talk about it.
I didn't even log on yet, and she said it works. Okay, whatever.
So, and he came up with what I think was a really, really radical approach. Right? In other words, all the things that were going on that Jews were involved of social justice and for equality and for finding beauty in art and literature and all those kind of things. Again, rather than see those as negative things that were taking away from what religion really was, Rav Kook really said that all of that was really a positive expression of the soul. In other words, he saw that what it meant to have a soul, what it meant to is to have this desire to connect to everything in the world, to appreciate everything, to appreciate nature. He was very into art. He was, he spoke about the value of art. He spoke about the value of physical education and of sports. And again, and many of these things got him in a lot of trouble. I mean, he had a very, not so much in Europe, but after he got to Israel, I mean, the last 31 years of his life, he had a lot of people who were not happy with him. And not just because he was a Zionist, but I mean, these ideas, I mean, again, he spoke about the early settlers and he spoke about the fact, who were playing ball on Shabbos and they were breaking all these things, and he looked at it and he said that there was, again, the various things they were doing, their desire to build up the land, their desire for equality, for fairness, rather than these being, so to speak, goyish concepts that we're not supposed to do. He saw this as an expression of like their soul's desire to connect to everything important. And that's the thing. And for Rav Kook, again, for him, the religious soul, the religious experience is not someone who kind of shuts themselves out and who fears everything and who tries to, kind of quash everything down. But rather, it really, the more godly you are, the more you kind of let your soul be itself, the more it embraces all these different experiences. And I mean, it's true, he saw value to a certain degree, even in other religions. I mean, he was a really very, very complex thinker. And but really one of the things that I think are very important, and again, and this is, I think, ties into the idea of Teshuva, was that the purpose of religion, the purpose of mitzvos were not there to crush us. Right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think that sometimes the approaches that we hear, it really is it's this very, it's negative. And any aspect that we have, any little bit that we stick, any aspect of ourselves that sticks out of the box, even slightly, and we're into some sort of idea that doesn't feel really, really religious, not there. And he really saw this as being not true. He said religion really gives room for all those things, that really all of these concepts are very, very good. And most basically, he saw man as being good. He really saw that essentially that our neshama, that our soul desires to do good, and the things that it wants to do, your natural inclination are to be involved in all sorts of positive things. And the role of religion is not to squash that down, is not to tell you, oh, that part of you is bad and that part of you is bad, but to kind of help you channel it and to help you be into all these things, but in a very, very positive way. And the interesting thing is, I mean, again, I'm just, because of time, I'm not going to read all these things inside, but for Rav Kook, what is the idea of chet, of sin? What does it mean when a person sins? it means the degree to which you lose that, the degree to which you lose being, you lose yourself, right? It says again, it's not that we start off, like some sort of like Christian idea of like original sin, and we start off as these like really bad people, and if we don't find religion and learn all these things, we stay bad, but rather we start off good. We have an aspect of ourselves, inherently the things that speak to us of kindness and of chesed and of justice and of beauty and of physical activity. These are not things that we have to be, crushed out, but rather these are things that are good. And sin is when you lose that. That's Rav Kook's approach. He says that really, that right, sin is moving away from all these things. We think of it, as closest to God, as shrinking us, but really it's supposed to help make things. It's really supposed to help make things greater. And I mean, he really goes through to a large degree. And I mean, again, we don't have time to go through all of this. I mean, I'll read you, maybe one quote, but again, he really goes through all these things that again that sin mean. What does it mean that when a person sins? It means when they've lost contact with who they're supposed to be. And again, he speaks in very, very strong terms. I mean, if you want afterwards, I could show you where he speaks about in very strong terms about religion, that rather than helping you connect to all these things that you want to do, and rather encouraging you in that, it actually crushes it. And he actually says that education, again, this is an interesting idea, right? As a teacher, sometimes we think about it like, what is education? You take a person who's either born bad or evil or just, yetzer hara, or at least maybe like born with nothing, and you have to make them good. Rav Kook says, no, it really is just sort of like revealing for people what's already there. And again, I think it's this very, very, sort of refreshing idea that Rav Kook has, that again, that we don't have to, that we can trust ourselves, that we can trust our instincts, that these aspects are not things that have to be beaten down and not things that we're supposed to, turn back on, but they're actually something positive. He says, like, for example, he says, I'll just read one section again. There's a number of things that I want to read, but just in terms of time, he says, Ani tzarich limtso as ashri b'kirbi pnima. I have to find, and again, it does sound like, it doesn't sound like what a rabbi would say, but he says, I have to find that which inside of me, that which is going to help me be happy. Lo b'haskamat habrios, not based on what other people think I should be doing. The lo b'shum karira eza shetiya, and not that there's a certain job, there's a certain path that I'm supposed to take. Kol masha akir yoser as atzmi, as asmosai. The more that I'm in touch with myself, the more I'm real with who I am, and I know really who I am. And the more I let myself be who I'm supposed to be, and to stand on my feet, based on like thinking about things in hakara and hargasha, v'shira yoter ya'irli or Hashem. The more I'm in touch with who I am, the more I'm in touch with God. Right? Again, I mean, it sounds very, very foreign for what we hear, where like so much of what we're told is that, individualism is bad. And again, it's interesting, like he was living in a time for communism. We have a different type of groupthink, but it really, he's saying that like that this sense that people have of, everybody marching in step and everybody dressing a certain way and everybody acting a certain way. He says that's sin. That's not Judaism. He says Judaism is allowing yourself to discover who it is, who you really are. And he says that, and that religion is really supposed to assist you in that. It's not supposed to oppose you. It's not supposed to stop you. It's not supposed to take that joy that you have and kind of rip it out of you. And if that's the case, he says, this is very, very nicely, he says, so what is tshuva? It's returning to yourself, which automatically in itself is returning to Hashem. Right? That was about what does it mean to who you're returning to? You're returning to God, you're returning, to some version of yourself, or you're returning to the past. He says it really, again, the more you're in touch with who you are, the more you're able to really let yourself be who you are, the more you become authentic, the more that means that you're close to Hashem. Right? And I was thinking about it. I mean, there are a lot of Rav Kook is very into Tamei HaMitzvos, right? That not that there's some sort of objective reason that we could ever know why we do mitzvos. He says only God knows why we do the mitzvos. But he said, we always had to come up with we have, each generation has to figure out what the mitzvos mean to them. And, they speak about it like, we know, right, it's about to be Rosh Hashanah. And, we blow all these sets of, Tekiah Shvarim, Tekiah Trua, Tekiah Shvarim Trua, Tekiah. right, basically, a total of 30 kolos, that's your yotze the mitzvah. But it's basically, it always starts off a tekiah, a whole sound, then some sort of broken something, which represents crying or pieces, and then this whole sound. So I think like with our Rav Kook, we would think that, what does it mean? We start off whole, then we break ourselves, and then we have to somehow try to figure out how to make, put the pieces back together. But I think Rav Kook is really saying something else, and I'll back it up to something that he said from a student. I think he says that we really always are whole. We really have an essence that is whole. That there's not, we might make mistakes, and there might be certain things like the Ram said that we might want to learn from, that we might want to try to improve on, and there might, but really we are whole. And even when we do something wrong, it doesn't take away from that. It doesn't break us. It doesn't make us bad. Again, it might divert us a little bit from where we're supposed to be. Sort of like we were saying before in terms of the Rambam, it might be that you have to get yourself, kind of back going in the right direction. But really, I think like the second tekiah within that is that even after the sin, even when we do an avera, yeah, it has an effect, and we might have to work on it. We might want to learn from it, and we have to move away from it so that but really, the real us has never changed. And to back that up, I have this little sefer. I don't know. I pick up this one from time to time. I don't even remember when I picked this up. I don't even know who he was, but there was this. Rav Kook had a number of students. Some of them were better known. He had a student, Rav David Cohen, who was a Nazir. Rav Aryeh Levin, if you've read it, Tzaddik in our time, who was very close with him. He was Misar Kedushin for El Yashiv. Rav Yitzhak Kutner was learned under him. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of a lot of communities that.
To be a Nazir today?
Well, yeah. Larry had one student who was a Nazir. But he also had a student whose name was Rav Yaakov Moshe Charlap. And Rav Yaakov Moshe Charlap, he has a sefer called, I believe his main sefer is called Mei Marom. He had a son, he lived in Eretz Yisrael, he was a student of Rav Kook. He had a son who moved to America. I think he became a Rav here. And I think it was his grandson, Rav Zulun Charlap, was many years, he was at Yeshiva University. And this is a sefer, it's called Michtavei Marom. And what it is that the student of Rav Kook who stayed in Israel, he would write letters to his son in America, checking on him. First of all, it's very striking, just first of all, how beautiful it is. I mean, the obvious love that he had for his son. Sometimes I think like, if we read these letters, I mean, it's true also with Rav Hutner's letters. If you read the letters that he writes to his Talmidim, and this is something like as a Rebbe, I really try to aspire to this, the absolute love, the way he signs and the way he talks to them. And certainly here in Michtavei Marom, Rav Charlap, the way he speaks to his son, it's really, really beautiful. But just to connect to what we're saying, and I think just to show that this idea is really true, he says to his son, he says, V'hinei ikar yesod hatshuva. He says the main idea of tshuva taloi b'ma shemakirim sha'achet hu rak mibechina mikrev v'lo me'etzem. He says the main thing when it comes to tshuva is to realize that no matter what we do wrong, it's external to ourselves. It's not really, it doesn't become who you are. You are not your mistakes. You are not your averos, right? It says it's something which is mikra. It's something that's external to you, right? It's like the difference between, like, if you have like Teflon pots, right? You might, you might make a mess on them, but you wipe it off and it's the same pot. The pot hasn't changed, as opposed to like a garment which gets stained and which it's permanently there and it's ruined and you might never be able to get back. He says again, and this is very much I think what Rav Kook is saying, that really that our essence, who we are not our averos. We are not the mistakes we've made. They don't turn us into a bad person that we have to somehow beat ourselves up and we have to somehow do tshuva, or we're going to, he says again, they're mikra v'lo mi'etzem. V'lo od, and not only this, ela sheyesod hachet ba rak bizman shemitchalesh ha'akara ha'atmis. And he says, and sin only comes, and again, I mean, you hear like the echoes of what, of his Rebbe Rav Kook here, sin only comes when we forget who we are, when we lose that sort of, that self-awareness and that willingness to really. And he continues just a little bit more on the next page, and he says, whatever it is that we do wrong, it's mikra. It's something which is external to us. It's something which can, again, we want to work on, we want to avoid doing it. Like the Rambam, we want to figure out how for the future to do it. As long as you if you realize this, if you realize that Avera does not make you bad, that it doesn't change who you are, that's the first step in being able to do tshuva. And if you do that, if you realize that you're able to free yourself from it, v'lachzor el atmis hamakoros, and to return to your natural good state of who you are. And so I think it really. And again, as I told you, they always say like the famous thing like the Musar Rebbe who says like speaking to myself as much as anyone, even if I only change myself, whatever it is. Again, I can tell you that Moti Shabbos, as I was saying Slichos, I was trying to like think about the words I was saying, and I was trying to think about fitting it within this perspective, looking at it from a perspective of there are things that I did that I regret a little bit, and there are things where I wish I had made other decisions, and things like that. But again, like the Rambam said, not looking at it of I shouldn't do wrong things because otherwise I'm going to get punished, or I should do mitzvahs because that's the only way that God's going to be good to me. But moving away from this, if we really can focus on this idea, I think of Rav Kook, this idea that we have this goodness in us, and to trust ourselves, and to not allow religion to beat us down, and to tell us that we're bad, and that the things that we're interested in, really, it's all bittul Torah, right? And everything we do is moving. You're either learning or davening, or you're wasting time. Rav Kook very much would not have said that. Again, he was involved in he promoted art and sports and nature and all these things. He saw all these things as being a very, very positive thing. And I think if we take this approach, rather than seeing Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur as a time of guilt and of reminding us of that we're bad and that we have all these terrible things that we'll never really be able to get rid of. And look, that scares me. because that's the thing, because we all know that we do things. There are certain there are certain averos, and I'm certainly not here to confess whichever specific things I'm talking about. But there are things that time after time after time. I get there on Yom Kippur and okay, Hashem, this year I'm going to try to be better, and like the next year, it's the same thing again, and it's the same mistakes, and I think that we can really start to think that we are our averos, and that it's a part of ourselves, and there's nothing we can do to break free of it. But I think this really gives us an approach, ability to think of ourselves as good and as connected to God and as having value. And that as tshuva is something not again to about reward or punishment, but tshuva really as a way to help us get back to being who we're supposed to be. Yeah.
So, given all that,
okay.
Let's say you just at the end just now just briefly alluded to it. You come in on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, right? And you're reading through the list of al-Chaitz, and I'm like, and you're like, oh yeah. That one last year, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that. So, like, how do you deal with that? Because you know that you're supposed to be doing tshuva first. You also know that as soon as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is over, and you're no longer obligated because of the time to feel sorry for it, you're just going to go back to doing it again. Like what do you do with that?
If you know that you're not going to, tshuva means that you're sorry. I'm not. I'm never gonna, but you will.
Right, but there's different levels here. I have machlokas with my.
So we're lying.
Well, no, so again, it depends what you're saying. I had machlokas with the Rebbe mine over this. He said you're supposed to get up there on Yom Kippur and get up there and say to Hashem, the whole list. I'm never doing it again.
But it's a
lie.
And
I said it's not true. I said right, and this is there's an idea of the Michtam Eliyahu or Eliyahu Dessler. He has this idea called the Nekuda Sabachira. He says that there's a small window where we have free will. Right? He says I'll give you an example. I didn't exactly pass this with flying colors, but today I went and I'm working in the city, and Manhattan traffic has for years and years and years has been a big it's been a big test for me how I handle it, and many times I handle it less than perfectly. And I drove in this morning in traffic, and I went in and I put my car in early parking so I could come down here afterwards, right? It's cheaper if you get it in by 10 o'clock. Okay, I got it in 7:30. Everything's great. I go to get the car out. It's supposed to be $18, and the guy says $49. I'm like, early parking. He's like, yeah, but it says 7 o'clock. It's 7:09.
Oh wow!
Right?
Oh wow!
$35 that, or whatever, 30 whatever bucks that I it's not that I have it and just was going to throw it away anyway. And again, so on the one, I was upset. And there was a but that's the thing. Like honestly, no matter how upset I could have been, no matter how mad I would have been, even if he would have said it's $490, we're not giving you your car until then, I could not have committed murder. Whatever weaknesses I have, and whatever I might have thought in my head, and whatever I might have said in the car after, I closed the door and made sure that my phone was, that I hadn't accidentally left my phone on and that someone was going to be, whatever it is, I could not have committed murder. In other words, so that is outside of my realm of bechira. In other words, I don't sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to kill. No. It's I don't have free will with that. It's outside, right? On the other hand, the ability to walk away and say, it's only money. Baruch Hashem, my family is healthy. I had a nice day in school. I enjoyed teaching. I'm going down to speak, and learn Torah with people I like. It's okay. It's only money. That's not yet where my free will is either. That was not but somewhere in there, they have the ability to, what am I going to say to the poor worker who's just doing his job? He doesn't own the car. He's being told by his boss, they come after that time. That's where I have my free will. And I think that's the thing. In other words, I think the Mechta Mel is very, very powerful because first of all, it tells us that we all struggle over different averos, but we all struggle in the same way. We all have the things the averos we would never possibly do, and we all have the mitzvos that we would never, we're not right there. In other words, that's the thing. I'm not, I don't have the ability. I say I'm never going to speak, lashon hara again. It's just, there might be moments where I might be able to do it, or I might, So
what do you say?
So again, my approach is what I think it is that in other words is to work on what the Mechta says is to work on those things. Yeah, there are certain things that are outside of it, and to some degree you can work on. In other words, if today, if I, when that moment comes where something that I really am tempted by, I choose not to do it, I can move it little by little. But in other words, what he basically says is you're not really on the hook for those things.
So leave the big stuff out and focus on stuff
or not even just the big stuff, but the stuff that right now you're not there. Right now you're not there. And I think that's what I always would say to my students, you could say, I mean, the truth is, I think what you say is, I really I'm sorry that I do this. This is something that, I wish I was at the point where I wasn't there. And I hope one day I'll be at that point, but right now I'm not. And I think, again, this is Mechta Mayal. He's very, very from, and I think it's an important thing just to recognize that there are these categories, all of us. And again, and the great thing about it also enables us to look at other people, right? Because sometimes we'll be like, oh, you know what? I might do things wrong, but that guy, But what Mechta was saying is, again, you might have a different avera, but again, we all have that same struggle. We all have those things that we're never tempted to do wrong. We have those things that we never possibly could do right. Those are but right now we have this little struggle, and we're all involved in that struggle, right? It's like the famous question kids always say, oh, do I get 1 million mitzvah points? Mitzvah points, the Rambam, do I get 1 million mitzvah points? I didn't eat, treif today. I didn't eat, non-kosher when I walked by. Every second I get 1 million, I didn't. No, not at all. I mean, in other words, the moment is, was there a moment where you were tempted, where someone said, hey, buddy, instead of buying the $8 burger down the street, 99-cent Big Mac, and where you sat there and said, and you said, no, that you get schar for it. But in other words, that's the thing. In other words, I think it's important. I think what he's giving us is the ability to say, yeah, there are certain things right now that's not where I am. And again, not that it's okay, hey, God, sorry, bud, that's it. But in other words, I'm working on myself. I'm, committed to trying to be a different person come this time next year. But again, the things that I really want to try to stop, the things where I really want to say, I'm really going to try to not go back to it, we should say that. And the other thing, right, I don't think we should lie. I don't think we should lie to God. I don't think we should, I think be honest. In other words, and that's part of it. In other words, if we really look at it as a relationship, if we really, and that's, in Tanakh, it's there, in Chazal, if we really look at it, husband and wife, or, a father and a child, I mean,
So what do you do if let's say I'm not going to give any specific examples, but because A, it's not anybody's business, and B, but let's say you come across something hypothetically in the tefillah, right? That you say that's not true, I'll hate shechatanu lifnecha fill in the blank. Yeah, that if I say that, it's not happening. Would you skip that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Look, I mean, it's interesting. There's if you look for slichos, right? I mean, slichos is supposed to be one of these things that you wake up in the last third of the night while it's still dark, and And if you look,
Oh, that ship has sailed.
Right. Like, right. I mean, and yet if you look at the way we say slichos, right? Like, I mean, especially like on days off, people are saying slichos like 9 in the morning. Like, I mean. Are
you kidding? I used to go to Bubba Vet.
Right. That's right. I forgot I'm in Brooklyn. Right. I live in the Misnagish area, so it's like but if you look, the Mefarshim say something very interesting. They say that in the slichos there are all these phrases where we're saying to Hashem, "I got up early to say slichos," and they say, "Don't say that. You're actually supposed to. You're actually supposed to change the word because it's not true." They say. I mean, I just saw the other day, like the Aruch HaShulchan, he says like. You don't want to be saying like, right towards the end of the year, you're saying sleep. You don't want to be lying to God and saying, God, look at this. I got up early to say sleep. You didn't, which is okay. In other words, but you're saying, so, in fact, one of them the other day, I remember I was saying it. It says like something ba'ashmura as haboker. And the Chazan keeps on saying it. It's like, I mean, in school, in the school we're in, we would say like very, very short. So I was going to 10 o'clock slichos at night. Like I hadn't even gone to sleep yet. So like, what am I going to say? Like, God, please forgive me early in the morning as I've woken up. So I looked at the words. I saw like, I said, yeah, please forgive me. And that's the thing. I think that's the thing. Honestly, would say again, you can say I regret that sin, but you can say like an honest conversation, like all the things that we do wrong. And especially look, Baruch Hashem, I have a big family. I'm married. You hurt the people who you're closest to. You do a lot of times, and again, and some of it, like sometimes you'd like to say, "Oh my God, I'll never do that again," and sometimes like I'm probably gonna end up doing that again. And again, I think it's important to be honest with the people you love, and with Hashem also, and to say like, like I really feel bad about that. I really want to try to work on myself. I know I shouldn't do that, and I'm gonna, I hope I'll reach a point in my life.
Because like last year was the first time that I like actually realized that we have this expectation of like every year we're doing Teshuva for all of it, and we have to come up with a way to say that there's no way we're going to do it when we walk out of Shul on Yom Kippur, and then last it's like no, I'm lying through my teeth. Of course I'm going to go out and do this again. The question is like how long am I going to be able to guilt myself into not doing it? But like I'm going to do it again. So yeah, I've been wondering since last year, like how.
If you look on some of the Bali Moshe, they talk about finding like one thing to work on. In other words, that's thing like there really is that danger of sort of like having that moment, right? Like we've all had that, like you go to like a shiur or you go someplace beautiful and you feel like really inspired. You're like, God, I'm gonna be a tzaddik from now on. Like I'm never, and it's not real. And if you do that, there's a loss in that, right? In other words, because if you really go and you think you're gonna change everything and then you fall on your face, what you're going to is. Change is, that's a famous statement where you saw Salanter, it's harder to change 1 meter than to go through all of Shas. And, I haven't gone through all of Shas yet, but I'm closer to that than I am to changing any of the meters that I have to work through. But, I mean, they talk about, again, like, don't do that. Don't set yourself up, because, again, it's a horrible feeling, right? In other words, when you're like, right? Because we get into it on Yom Kippur, and if the Chazan doesn't schlep too much and he uses like some nice tunes, we start to feel like really, and by the end, Shema Yisrael, and we're screaming, and we feel like but you're setting yourself up for failure because the truth is like you're going to come down from that. And the Bible, so they talk about find 1 or 2 things where you could say, this is my avoda for this year. Yeah, if things just fall right and everything goes really, really well, maybe I'll add certain things, but in other words, but really again, like not to use the list as it's certainly not all or nothing. And again, and like we said before, again, I don't want to sound like too like new agey or things like that. But again, rather than looking at it as like, what can I do to avoid punishment? But in other words, but again, like how can I take a step forward? How can I make it that the person who I'm gonna be, that I'm going, that I'm working towards becoming a different person than I am.
But also like another part of it that because like I said, last year was the first year I actually paid attention to what I was saying. Like half the stuff that I say, like I never like Bagadnu with what? With Gazalnu? Not really. I mean, Divarnu Dofia maybe. But like but like you're going through the list and you're like, oh, I'm paying, and then you read in the back of the article, it's like they detail like even the tiniest little dakos is something that you're doing Teshuva for. Like I don't think so. So like half the stuff doesn't even apply, and then the other half I'm not going to do anyway. So
but I think that might be set up in certain ways. I think purposely. First of all, the fact that we're saying in plural, In other words, first of all, I think it enables us, right? You know,
Well, not me, but that guy.
No, but I mean, there are certain even like halachos that talk about that there were certain korbanos where, like, you know, that would be done in a certain place in the base of Mikdash, right next to where a person did a sin, so that the people would, if you saw somebody over there, you didn't know if it was because they did a sin or because they had to be there for some other reason. And it talks about the various halachos that are set up like this, right? When it talks about going away, you know, when there's a war, right? You know, if you're a person who just got married, you don't have to do it, and a person who just built a house doesn't have to do it, and a person who just had a harem, and a person who's afraid of sin and thinks that they're, you know, God, so why do we really do this? It says because if all we said was everyone who's afraid from sin, right? All the guys be walking away, and the guy we go, look at that faker, I knew it, I knew he was a fake, right? So it has all these people go, so that we don't know. We look at it, and so that's part of it. I think the ability that's for it to say in plural. I mean, also, there's a story of Soloveitchik, right? You know, I mean, as the wife of Soloveitchik, right? You know, so he, after leaving his father's home, he got a PhD in Berlin. And he, right, and he came from like a Litvish place, right, where they don't sing much, or maybe at all. And he said, remember, like he talked about when he came to Berlin, and he goes to a shul in Berlin, and they come to Hashamnu Bagadnu, and I don't know if it's our tune, but they start singing, right? And again, like imagine if you're a Litvak, like Hashamnu Bagadnu, like the only problem is like you have like the simcha of like getting to beat yourself up. I mean, like a little bit.
It almost leads to Kalas Rosh.
But he says, yeah, right. He says like, You think of it, it's like very, very strange. It's very, very strange. And he said, but being a brisker, he tried to figure out like what's why are they singing? It couldn't just be that they're just singing or whatever. Some chazan did it one year because everything that we do as Jews has to have some sort of there's like a brisker. And he said that, like as individuals, we don't know how things are going to turn out. But he says like Klal Yisrael, Hasham Baganu, the repetition, the one we say quietly, that's just for ourselves. But the one that we say during Chazaras Hashatz, the one we say along with the Sibur, that's really for us as the Klal. He says that we're singing there because we know that, what, as individuals, not everybody every year, but as individual, but as a tzibur. So I think that's the thing also. Like we're saying it, yeah. I mean, like Baruch Hashem, right? There's certain things on the list, where you could go like, okay, I didn't do that one, and that's okay also. In other words, like again, we're Ashamnu. We're not saying Ashamti or Gazalti or whatever. I mean, it could be maybe that's okay also. In other words, we're speaking as a tzibur. So I think that's yeah.
Where do we see in the Nusach Tefillah?
So again, I mean, it's sort of
like where, or rather, not like evidence. I mean, where in the Nusach Tefillah can I find my peak? You know what I mean? So if in the Salat is not, is neutral, because it's one energy. I wonder where in the Nusach Tefillah do I have that?
So that's the thing. Like I can't. I'm literally. I'm sort of like my own guinea pig in this. So like I can't. Like I'm working on it myself. But again, like I can tell you, like as I was saying, Slichos Motzi Shabbos, and like. I actually enjoyed it for the first time, like I mean, and not without some sort of like crazy like self-guilt beating myself up. But again, I try to look at it and say like, okay, how can I read these words in a way that are talking about where I could find this? And I think that's the thing. I think I have to look at it. I mean, like hopefully a year from now, or maybe even 2 weeks from now, if you ask me that question, I'll say, you know what, like this part of the Machzor really is like a really good place to focus on. But I don't know. That's the real answer. I don't know, but again, I think it's there, and I think that I think it can be found. In other words, I think that I think a lot of these things are like a Rorschach test. Like if you want to, like they show you like the ink blot, and they say, what does this look like? I mean, like everything can be found in there, right? I mean, there's there are definitely the parts. If you want to be one of those people who love to like beat yourself up for stuff, there's a lot of stuff that you can do that. But in other words, I think there are a lot of psukim and all this stuff that talks about the love that Hashem has for us, and the fact that Hashem wants us to improve, and the fact that He's not looking to punish us. There are all these like really nice lines in there, but in other words, we've been so conditioned, I think, through our education to sort of focus on the other ones. But I think I think it really is. It we saw it like on Sefer Nehemiah talks about it in the Gemara. Even Yom Kippur, it's happy. We're getting another chance. It's not that we're we're not. I don't think we're supposed to like view ourselves as like that the executioner is about to chop off our head if we don't do it. But I think it's an opportunity that again, like this whole focus on like Hashem will like with this father type of figure or this spouse or whatever it is, whatever like term that will make it work for you. hopefully, look, I don't know how my wife has survived with me for 22 years. But but that's the thing. But in the end, there is chesed in a relationship. There is a sense that time after time after time after time, and oh, this time is me. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot, and all those things. If we really look at it like having a relationship with Hashem, I think that really is. There's that words I can't tell you, but I can tell you I'm pretty convinced, from trying within Slichas that within Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening that we'll find it too.
When Asher said that, when you know that you're going to be doing something bad, so again, so the way I think of it, I also used to feel very guilty, and then I started making peace with it by realizing that this is what being human is, and I feel like it's God's plan because He put us here to overcome our whatever weaknesses. And if He wanted us to be perfect, He would have just made us perfect, but that would defeat the purpose. So struggling and trying to be better and sinning is part of the plan. So that helped me just relax and make peace with it.
Right, I think it was. I remember Noah Weinberg. I remember he spoke about. I think the word chait is connected to missing the mark, like in archery, like when you try to hit it, you missed. In other words, you're aiming for something. In other words, again, you have we all want to be doing the right thing, and I think that's that's sort of Cook saying, we all have we're good. We want to be doing good things, but sometimes you miss the mark. Just like with an archer, you slightly tug the wrong way, and we missed the mark. I think it's much more that than the sense of just these evil people and whatever it is. Again, like all these sigufim and all these things. Again, it exists. There are, the Rishon stuff they talk about and all this money that you're supposed to give away and literally sitting in the ice and cold. But, even if there was a time when I think that was, that was an avoda that I think could work for people. I don't think that's their avoda for today.
I think that for the people that came to I made peace with that they were, by them it was after Ahava. So, and we just skipped through 20 stages, we're going to go right away to Seguf and beating myself up. After reaching a certain experience from learning Rambam, I'm like, you know what? All that might have been something after, something greater. And for some reason today we're just shortcut, right straight to the beating up.
Right, that's a really great way of putting it. I think that's the thing. In other words, I think for our door, I think that just the negative is just it's really not healthy. And that's the thing. Again, I know so many, I know a lot of people who are struggling religiously and people who have left, and just people don't really, parents and teachers. How much when we tell kids, when we give this negative message about them, how much at a certain point someone just says, what, I don't want to be part of this. That's the thing, how many times can you tell? I went to an event where there were people who have left the community. I'll just put it that way. And I said I could tell which women went to the Frummas Beis Yaakov because they were the one. Not just maybe the dress was a little low over here, a little short. It had pieces cut out on the side. In other words, and that's the thing. If there's only so many times where you could tell someone that the length of your skirt is causing tsunamis in Japan and people are getting cancer because they're not covering everything. There's only so many times before there's payback for that, and I think that's the thing. I think our door really has to be, and I think that's where Hasidus is very important. I think Rav Kook really, for me, it speaks to me very strongly. That's the thing. It might have worked. It might have worked within a certain worldview where it was part of a bigger picture. But I think that we've really sort of lost our way in a lot of ways. We never get to the Ava. It's always it's all this guilt, and it's all this it's all this to really beat a person up. And we shouldn't be surprised if you beat someone up after a while, where they say, this hurts, I'd like it to stop. So I think for this door, I think that we really have to again as I said, it's not the only way. And again, there's all sorts of approaches within Hasidus, and I think we have to look for it.
Going back to the question, Lauren Wilson says you may still do the same with there, but it takes a bigger stimulus for it to happen.
What do you mean? In other words, even if you still end up doing it, but in other words, it might you're moving the chain a little bit.
Right.
That's I think that's an important thing also. In other words, I was speaking to somebody about this the other day, that sometimes a victory is eating the unhealthy food 5 minutes later. in other words, or the things you scream in the car when you're mad for paying an extra $32, or or words that can be said on network TV or whatever it is. I'm just saying, like, there are, in other words, it's not either you succeed perfectly or you fail. There are, in other words, I think that's a really good way of putting it. That, in other words, that moving the chain little by little, that, to celebrate like small victories also, not to look at it as like either I perfectly succeed or I failed.
You really make me want a cookie.
5 minutes.
Look, I've been actually working myself, right? I used to be a marathon runner, and let's just say, like you can see, I'm no longer built like a marathon runner. And I've been like working myself pretty well, and I've been eating, and I'm always taking the stairs in school, not taking the elevator. And then like I didn't get dinner tonight, and I figured, like I remember, and then again, not trying to make you feel guilty. Remember last time I'm like, okay, there'll be fruit and there'll be pretzels, and I got here and it was like, okay, wafers or Pringles. And I'm still thinking about those $32 that I spent in the parking garage tonight. And it's like, so I ate my stress tonight, right? And with Pringles, you can't just take just one, right?
Those are some tasty feelings.
Right, so
This is your one tonight. It's not time for dinner.
No, I'm good. I believe me, I'm full of Pringles now. All right. Anyway, thank you, and I'll stick around if anyone has anything else they want to discuss.
There are a few people in the group.
You have questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think Esther and Leah both.
Okay. Okay. Let's scroll back to find them.
No, they didn't ask them. They wanted me to tell you when the class was over so they could.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Wait a second.
So the weather's nice. Huh?
Can I ask one?
Yeah, please.
I'm not sure I understand so clearly why Rosh Hashanah would do tshuva. Like Yom Kippur, okay, but Rosh Hashanah is like, I'm not really clear.
Listen, so Rosh Hashanah, it's like a very interesting thing. I mean, Rosh Hashanah is not really about doing tshuva. It's certainly not about, like, there are no al chaitz. There are even some places where they have the minhag that, like, you don't mention chait at all, right? Even in Avinu Malkeinu, where it just says Avinu Malkeinu. Some shuls have a minhag not to say, but if you look, I mean, there's really, Rosh Hashanah really is really about being Mamlech Hashem. It's really, this is why we have the parak of Shema before we have the parak of Vahaya. That first you have to accept Hashem as king, and then you accept his mitzvahs. So the same sort of thing. In other words, Rosh Hashanah really is about being Mamlech Hashem, which I think really that's the thing. I mean, that's it's really a place where, I mean, Rosh Hashanah should be. It really is joyous. I mean, again, it really. It is supposed to be a joyous time. It really is not a time when you're supposed to beat yourself up. But somehow, like, we've kind of like packaged it all together. But in other words, like, the first thing is just to recognize, is to accept Hashem as Melech. Yom Kippur is then, like, once we've done that, okay, well, what does it mean to serve God? Like, what does it mean? Like, how do we, live in terms within that? In other words, but Rosh Hashanah really is not, like that's. I mean, even like I'm not such a big gematria guy, but even when I am, at least has to equal the right thing. Like, so when people don't eat, nuts because egos equals chait -1. Not my thing, but that's like, you see, like, people are being so careful not to chait based.
I'm gonna duck have nuts.
Yeah, it always annoyed me. I thought it was so stupid.
Well, I don't like to. I'm not, I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying, like, to me, it's maybe a little bit of an extreme manifestation, but it's just another way. Again, is that Rosh Hashanah is not about. We don't. It's not. We don't deal with hate.
The question was because you don't feel like davening sometimes. Is that an avera? Should you push yourself to daven even when you don't feel like it?
I hate sleepless.
Look, I mean, that's the thing. Look, I mean. That's the thing. First of all, I mean, slichos are incredible. It's difficult. I mean, first of all, again, they're very, very poetic, and we say each one. In other words, like the Sfarim, they say the same thing. And they're doing it for an entire month, so at least like you're working on it. But like Ashkenazim is like, if you happen to find one line that you understand, like you won't be seeing it again. Sorry, I mean, it's it's difficult. I mean, the language is extremely difficult. I mean, look, again, I'm not, so into like self-confessional, but when I say that I don't have such a good relationship with slichos, like I don't always say slichos. I mean, this year, like I really made a commitment to kind of be more involved in saying it. But like, I mean, that's like, I don't know. I would stay away from that term of like, is it an avera? I think again, it is a sense of that, ideally, yeah, if we're able to, we should say slichos. Again, if you really want to get all halachic, you can talk about, do women have a chiyuv to say slichos? Is there a chiyuv? Is it a minhag before Rosh Hashanah? Really, the ikar of slichos is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Again, I really think it's important that we move away from this, mitzvah avera framework of kind of it's if within the scheme of things you can say, if you have a choice between watching, I don't know, Baruch Hashem, TV is not my Yetzer Hara. I have plenty of others. But if you have a choice between saying slichos and watching a TV show, yeah, it's probably in the scheme of things, it's probably better to say slichos. But I'm saying, I don't think that, I think that, sometimes we're tired and sometimes we're upset and sometimes we're busy. And look, sometimes it's shinkel hadas. That's the thing. Look, I went, I went the other night. I got up in the middle of the night. Last night I had a chavrusa. I have a Skype chavrusa once a week from Eretz Israel. So I said, okay, what do I choose? Talmud Torah, and again, I don't know, which I don't know. I don't think, again, not that I think we should say, there's no such thing as Averos or anything like that, but in other words, I just think this language of, is it an Avera, is it wrong? I think to look at it as again, which we want to have this relationship with Hashem, and slichos is one of the ways that we can maybe improve on that. But again, look, what it's saying in Nehemiah, you should send manos. We think of Mishloach manos as Purim, but doing something. If there's someone who's poor, going and doing a chesed for them, or helping an old lady, get groceries or something like that. I think in the scheme of things, and again, I'm not a posek, and I'm not, but I have to imagine if you had a choice between helping the old lady next door and saying slichos that you're probably not going to understand, 90% of the words. I don't think there's really much of a question of what you should be doing. I think so in that sense, again, it's a nice thing, and it's we should all aspire to get things right. But again, I don't think we should feel guilt in those moments that we fall short, especially with something like the slichos, which I'm not sure is if that's your biggest mistake for the year, you're good. Is there anything else or?
Also, if you miss a slichos the first time, you get a recap during Mila, so it's okay.
No, it's interesting. I read something this week that was talking about that. In other words, I actually, the truth is we haven't had a really good chazan where I daven, where Baruch Hashem, it's I'm not into chazanas, and he really has a beautiful voice, and he actually davens. He's not just putting all, I say something, some chazanim, it's sort of yeah, or just they're putting it. He davens. I really feel like it's actually a very very it's where was I going with this? I'm sorry, I lost this.
Recap during the
recap, and I was saying but still I got a little jealous. Moshe Shabbos, so another thing to add to the thing, right? Some of my friends in Teaneck, you had 8-ton cats, but I had a kumzitz beforehand, and some people went to see Lipa, and I'm like, that looks really cool. That would have been a really amazing starting experience. But a friend of mine said, that's the thing. You're building up to Yom Kippur. He said, if you have Yom Kippur, if you hit the high of Yom Kippur on the first night of Slichas, it's where do you go from there? So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, you build up to this Christian, but by the end, I'm pretty sure that anybody who even slightly tries, by the end when they're saying Shema you mean it. So between now and then, you're right. You do. It is. You do get the recap. You will come back to it. And
I actually meant it literally.
Right. Right. A whole bunch of them are actually repeated. But and look, and hopefully then I still use the same mosque. Or my best friend's parents got me for my bar mitzvah, which was more than 30 years ago. I still get the linear. Again. So yeah, it's important to try to see what the words mean or whatever it is. But I'm just saying that. Yeah, we do our best, and then we'll see it again on Yom Kippur, and hopefully by then we'll have
not gotten smitten.
Yeah.
I also feel free to have my own thoughts when I throw it out. I'm okay, so if the text doesn't speak to me, I just think my own thing. So I try to make it Yom Kippur oriented, whatever. But I do whatever I think.
Yeah, look, that's it's a long davening. I mean, look, those of you going to Atlanta, right? I mean, Shlomo Pill said, 4 hour, 12:30. I'm like, I was almost, it's almost tempted just to go for that.
Shoot the Baltila.
But look, I mean, that's the thing. It's difficult. You know, I mean, look, like I think we're like an ADD generation. I mean, it's like like you wait like 15 seconds it takes like for the computer to like do something, and you're like, this is crazy. It's like
That's why I bought this one.
right. Like in the old days, like you had like the Pony Express. Like you sent the letter, like I hope I'll hear from them in 6 weeks. I'm saying like, we don't have a lot of patience. We don't have a lot of big intent. It's hard. I mean, look, honestly, like I always say to people, like, do you think I'm being from when I learned during davening? I'm trying to do something like I don't want to do something wasteful, but it's hard. It's hard for me to concentrate on the davening. So I find something else that I can do. It's not a question of from kind. It's a question, right? I mean, put in your own words, read something meaningful, learn something. Yeah. I mean, say, that's saying also, I would say, like, say one of the slichos more slowly, like, let go through one, really work on understanding that one. I mean,
well, yeah, I tried that 1 year, and then the what's it called? No. The one that interrupts, like yeah. So like, I was told, well, what you could take your time reaches out. You like 5 words in, and they're up, like breaking my teeth on this Hebrew I never learned how to read, and it's like they're already up to Kelmelech, whatever it is.
Right, I think we get lost in that. In other words, that's thing. Like I sounds like when I watch other people daven, or like honestly, even for myself, I say like sometimes like I forgot to daven during davening. Like we're very like we teach kids to say all the words, and we maybe even teach kids to like move like they're saying it. But I Tov Ma'at Shelo B'Kavana, Shelo B'Kavana. I'm sorry, I'm saying the joke version. Tov Ma'at B'Kavana, Mehar Shelo B'Kavana. Right? Better to say less, but to really, for it to be.
So now I skip half.
Right, but that's saying I don't think that's wrong. In other words, I don't think like it's a means to achieving something, and I think that we've turned it into an end of just like I made it through all of slichas. I said all the words.
Just read English. I printed myself out the translation and just flipped through that during like the long form ones. The ones I know I'm never gonna get. I've never understood how like the chazans, how people in shul like they have to all be either kidding themselves or playing lawnmower, because there's no way that they're motor mouthing their ways through that.
Some people are very
fast. But again,
entire like 300 people in a
someone who's not fluent in Hebrew. Well,
right.
I think you could say the words. I don't think you could say the words and pay attention to what you're saying. And look, I mean that's for myself also like v'hurachim, right? Like there were shuls where I davened and where like I would be there and I'd be like v'hurachim, and the guy sitting down and like and I'm like, okay, like dude, either you really just read quickly where you're just not saying all the words. I'm like, what? Each time I say I say 2 chapters and I go through time. I mean, I'm just like, this way. I don't always have kavan even for that, but at least there's a chance. Like I stopped trying to win the race or at least keep up. And I think like and again, there are parts of davening where maybe it's better. But there are a lot of parts of davening where I mean, in December within the Hurachim, I mean. It really, the goal is not to say all the words. The goal is to, is that connection that it created. So.
Some of our Machzor in Memphis had a Philip Birnbaum Machzor, and interspersed every 10 times in the book, they had in this Machzor they had two pages of like quotes, and it was really very inspiring, like quote about kindness, quote about humility, and a whole 10, 20 quotes. And anyway, so I'm not like a what's it called? I think that it's also nice to bring in other things, like if you feel poetry would really make you feel close, then bring it in. Don't take it, put it in your answer.
Read something meaningful.
There's the things where the Ostrovchen they say from others. They say them 2 different. One is Alakena B'Kei V'Seinu. I'm sure you know that one. And then on Zay Caleb Amvei. So there's if someone could say Zay Caleb, this is my God. That means it's mine. So it's a relationship. So there's Vanveyu. Veyu is Ani Vehu. But if it's only okay, I'll read it. That's nice, but that's for man. It's for up there. But practically, and what I hear everyone is going around the table is really an experience of Zay Caleb. This is my God. And if I'm showing up to the relationship, it always works. As long as it's
and that's really
I
beautiful.
hear the Zay okay, this works for me.
There's something really. I think there's something very true and beautiful about that. I think that really. Look, I mean, davening is hard. I mean, again, we're not speaking in our native language, although we can. I mean, you can say stuff in English also. I mean, it's challenging. I think we should be okay with the fact that it's hard and that sometimes, sometimes we succeed and sometimes we get there, and occasionally have this, like the davening we feel, this is a rabbi I know. He told me. He grew up in the Summer, in the Summer world. He's no longer Summer, but he said there was a certain Summer Rav that he knew. He would see him davening Shemona Esrei, and sometimes he said it would be like 20 minutes. So, and sometimes it was like barely, and it was like, and he like the Lamdan Yitzarech, like he finally what is he like? He went over to me and said like, Lamdina Rabbeinu, please, like I'm sorry, but like I want to understand. And he said there's some times where I just feel like I could talk to Hashem all day, and there's sometimes I barely want to even speak to him. And again, this was like and again, like like the Briskers and us, or the Litvox, that's But I think that look, I think in the end of the day, I keep on saying this like to people. I think in the end of the day, and I think this is true in all parts of the Jewish community, Hasidus and all these things. I think that this is what's going to get us home. I think this, again, like a lot of these things that worked for the previous generations with like all the strictness and the punishment and the year. It really is the relationship. It really is like to the degree to which we help ourselves and our children and our friends and our, to reach that. I think it's going to be something. And look, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, everybody, all over the places, all these, articles and talking about people who are leaving and whatever it is. I mean, I think the first thing, if we, as a community, I think it means like looking in the mirror and saying, like, in other words, it's, again, it's very easy to talk about why do they leave, what's wrong with them. Why, it's very easy to talk about that, but it's important. I think as a tzibur, really, and each tzibur will have different things to ask, but like just as a tzibur, just to ask, like really, like why is it that nobody's buying what we're selling anymore? And it can't all be that, But like that's the thing. Like if you're selling, ice cream in the winter, it might not be that there's something wrong with the other person. It might be that like you're selling the wrong thing. And again, I don't mean to even like as sales, but I think that however you want to put it, I think that again, and that's what Rav Kook said. I mean, in each generation, you really have to the tamei mitzvos that work for someone, and the Sefer Chinuch time might not speak to us. So again, like we have to figure out, we have to really work. And okay, what does it mean to us today? What does the mitzvah mean to us? And I think that's for our door again. I think the relationship part. I think that's very, very powerful.
So
all right, thank you.
What you said about happy show tunes before, so being that I went to Chavetz Chaim, I witnessed this peculiarity when Yom Kippur they don't sing anything. It's because it's really Litvish. They don't sing anything. The one thing that they do sing is Adam Yisodar May Afar in the Sana Tokef, and just because of that people take it way too seriously and get hung up on it, they sing it to the tune of "I've been working on the railroad."
What?
Yes. That's the yeshiva minhag. You go to any Chavetz Chaim, they will sing "Adam Yisodar May Afar" to the tune of "I've been working on the railroad," just to impress upon people. Like, okay, chill out. Yes, yeah. The Rosh Hashiva would stand there, nodding his head, and the Chazan would be singing "I've been working on the railroad." I don't know exactly who started this, so that you should just like chill out a little.
Wow.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
What's
so
your name?
much.
Kiki Solomon.
You live here locally?
Monthly.
Oh wow. Happy gosh.
You made it.
Special.
Huh?
You made it.
Yeah, she came.
not saying other words. I'm like, you know what? Each time I say I say 2 chapters and I go through time. You know, I mean, I'm just like, you know, this way. You know, I don't always have kavanah even for that, but at least there's a chance. Like I stopped trying to win the race or at least keep up. And I think like. You know, and again, there are parts of davening where, you know, maybe it's better, you know, but there are a lot of parts of davening where, you know, I mean, in December within Behurachim, I mean, you know, it really, the goal is not to say all the words. The goal is to, you know, is that connection that it creates. So.
Some of our Machzor in Memphis, they had a Philip Bergman Machzor, and interspersed every, like, whatever, 10 times in the book, they had, in this Machzor, they had two pages of, like, quotes. And it was really very, like, inspiring, like, quote about kindness, quote about humility, you know, a whole, 10, 20 quotes. And anyway, so I'm not like what's it called? I think that, you know, it's also nice to bring in other things, like if you feel, I don't know, poetry really make you feel close, then, you know, bring it in, take it, put it in your answer, you know.
Yeah, read something meaningful. Yeah.
There are things where the Ostfachtin, they say from others, they say it on 2 different, one is on Akeda Latei Vesenu, I'm sure you know that one, and then on Zay Caleb on Vei. So there's, if someone could say Zay Caleb, this is my God, that means it's mine, so it's a relationship. So there's Van Vei, Vei is a need for who. But if it's only okay, I mean, that's nice, but that's for man, it's for up there. But practically, and what I hear everyone is going around the table is really an experience of Zay Caleb. This is my God. And if I'm showing up to the relationship, it always works, as long as it's.
Yeah, and that's
So
really
I hear the Zay okay, this works for me.
There's something really, I think there's something very like true and beautiful about that. I think that really, look, I mean, davening is hard. I mean, again, we're not speaking in our native language, although we can. I mean, you can say stuff in English also. I mean, it's challenging. I think we should be okay with the fact that it's hard and that sometimes, you know, I mean, sometimes we succeed and sometimes we get there, and, you know, occasionally have this, you know, like the davening we feel, you know, I mean, this is a rabbi I know, he told me he grew up in the Samer, you know, in the Samer world. He's no longer Samer, but he said there was a certain Samer Rav that he knew. He would see him davening Shmona Esrei, and sometimes he said it would be like 20 minutes. And sometimes it was like barely, and it was like. And he like the, you know, Lamdan Yitzarech, you know, like he finally was, he went over to me and said, like, you know, Yilamdina Rabbeinu, please, you know, like, I'm sorry, but like I want to understand. And he said there's some times where I just feel like I could talk to Hashem all day, and there's sometimes I barely want to even speak to him. And again, this was like you know, and again, like, you know, like the, you know, like the briskers and us, or the Litvox, you know, like, you know, that's, you know. But I think that, you know, look, I think in the end of the day, you know, I keep on saying this like to people. I think in the end of the day, and I think this is true in all parts of the Jewish community, you know, Chassidus and all these things. I think that this is what's going to get us home. I think this, you know, again, like a lot of these things that worked for the previous generations with like all the strictness and the punishment and the year, it really is the relationship. It really is like to the degree to which we help ourselves and our children and our friends and our, you know, to reach that. I think it's going to be something. And look, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, everybody, you know, I mean, all over the place, there's all these, you know, articles and talking about people who are leaving and whatever it is. I mean, I think the first thing, if we, you know, as a community, I think it means like looking in the mirror and saying, like, in other words, it's, you know, again, it's very easy to talk about why do they leave, you know, what's wrong with them. Why, you know, it's very easy to talk about that, but it's important. I think as a tzibur, really, and each tzibur will have, you know, different things to ask, but like just as a tzibur, just to ask, like, really, like, why is it that nobody's buying what we're selling anymore? And it can't all be that, you know. But like that's the thing. Like if you're selling, you know, ice cream in the winter, it might not be that there's something wrong with the other person. It might be that like you're selling the wrong thing. And again, I don't mean to even like as sales, but I think that however you want to put it, I think that again, you know, then that's what Cook said. You know, I mean, in each generation, you really have to the tamei mitzvos that work for someone, and you know, I mean, the Sefer Chinuch time might not speak to us. So again, like we have to figure out, we have to really work. And okay, what does it mean to us today? What does the mitzvah mean to us? And I think that's, you know, for our door again, you know, I think the relationship part, I think that's very, very powerful.
So
all right, thank you.
What you said about happy show tunes before, so being that I went to Chavetz Chaim, I witnessed this peculiarity when Yom Kippur they don't sing anything. It's because it's really litvish. They don't sing anything. The one thing that they do sing is Adam Yisod May Afar in the Sana Tokef, and just because of that people take it way too seriously and get hung up on it, they sing it to the tune of "I've been working on the railroad."
What?
Yes. That's the yeshiva minhag. You go to any Chavetz Chaim, they will sing Adam Yisod May Afar to the tune of "I've been working on the railroad," just to impress upon people. Like, okay, chill out. Yes, yeah. The Rosh Hashiva would stand there, nodding his head, and the Chazan would be singing "I've been working on the railroad." I don't know exactly who started this, so that you should just like chill out a little.
Wow.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
What's
so
your name,
much.
sir?
Kiki Solomon.
You live here locally?
Monthly.
Oh, wow. Happy gosh.
You made it.
Special.
Huh?
You made it.
Yeah, she came.
Wow.